show you how I built my Fire Nation Katara costume. So we're gonna need a few things. First off, for the armor, you're gonna need some EVA foam. I'm using the 5mm. You're also gonna need some dowels for the detailing. I'm using 10mm. You're gonna need some bias tape for the edges of the belt that she wears. And then you're gonna need some suede for the belt pieces. Some burgundy color suede. Then you're gonna need a bright red suede for the crop top and the skirt that she wears. And I'm using a dark burgundy velvet for the capris she wears under her skirt. You're also going to need paint to color the armor. And I'm using this, just the Krillin shortcuts. You don't need that much, so this should be plenty. And you're also going to need your patterns, and I'm actually using a few patterns for this. So the first one I'm using is one of these downloadable printable patterns, and I'm using that for the crop top she wears. I'm sure if you just Google one shoulder top, then you can find something that best suits your fancy. And for the rest of the outfit, I am using the Simplicity 1010. I'm using the D option for this. I'll have to modify it a little bit, of course, but I feel like it's the best, most suitable pattern for the outfit. And then for the capri she wears under her outfit, I'm using the Lizette B6 183, and I'm using this pattern for the capris. And you can either use your hair if you have dark hair, or you can wear a wig. Let's get started. So we're going to start with the armor because if you sew, like me, that might be where you struggle the most. So you'll want to get it out of the way before moving on to anything else. For my pattern, I used the pieces I drafted for my Yoko pattern for the gauntlets and shin guards. So if you haven't watched that video, you can learn how to make the pattern from there. I took an X-Acto knife and, using a ruler as a guide, I marked grooves at the top and bottom about 1/4 of an inch away from each other. But yours can be closer or further depending on what strikes your fancy better. After marking my grooves, I took a paper cutter and cut the stripe detail in an exact manner because I have all of the precision of a cross-eyed elephant and I need all the help I can get. But if a ruler, or heaven forbid, just your unguided hand are enough to get the stripe detailing right, then more power to ya. After curving in all of my stripe detail, I got my foam dowels and cut pieces to match the length of the gauntlets at the bottom edges. I also cut pieces for the armbands and anklets by using a measuring tape to figure out what size I would need for them. Before gluing anything down, I took a hairdryer and ran it over the gauntlets to give them that curved shape and expand the stripes I cut so that they looked more visible and prominent. point, I realized I forgot to cut a dowel piece for the gold band on Katara's red choker, so I quickly did that. Then I took an X-Acto knife and cut a line straight down the center so I would be able to insert the fabric portion of the choker later. Once that's done, I glued the dowel pieces to the gauntlets and glued the armbands and anklets into a circle before taking them outside to be painted. First I used a white base since this is a black foam. Then after that dried, I added a chrome layer so that the metallic element would be dramatized, and then, finally, the layer of gold. Now that everything's painted, we're going to start on the process of weathering. Whether or not you choose to weather your armor is entirely up to you, but I at least feel like it adds a certain layer of authenticity when you do. Katara is a waterbender, and therefore, since water is her main weapon of choice, I imagine that any metal she wears would eventually rust, which is probably why the Water Tribe stuck to bone for a metal substitute, and metal was used more prominently in the Fire Nation and the Earth Kingdom. In any event, I chose a blend of rust-colored acrylics and painted between the stripes of the armor, where I felt the rusting would be most noticeable. I took a damp paper towel so that the rusting would look more spotted, like actual rust, as opposed to just rust-colored paint on armor. Blending is key here, but there's really no wrong way to do it. If you're stuck, I suggest looking at pictures of rusted metal or rusted gold to get a better idea of what to do. You're going to need your newly weathered gauntlets, some E6000 because hot glue is not going to cut it here, and some separating zippers. Then, you're going to want to open your zippers up and make sure they're the right length for the gauntlets. If you're wondering why you can't just sew the zippers on, it's because you'll tear the foam to shreds and ruin the paint job. Just trust me, okay? Once everything looks good and you've glued the zippers down with the E6000, for the love of God, let the glue set and dry. Don't do what I did and try them on again and again while the glue was still drying, forcing me to have to reapply glue and pin them in place and the paint was just smeared all on the inside. Just leave them alone, okay? Patience is a virtue. Once your armor looks good and you're satisfied with how it turned out, then you can move on to your costume, and hopefully, in picking patterns, you didn't make the mistake that I did. Yeah, I can't use this, so anyway, because I'm such an excellent judge of the best course of action, I decided to just wing it for the skirt and belt, which actually ended up going a lot more smoothly than I thought it would. It's kind of hard to explain exactly what I did, but I more or less just cut a piece of fabric that I thought would be big enough to give me as much body and flow as I needed, and then folded it in half and tapered it out ever so slightly starting from the top. For the belt pieces, I just measured my waist to my knee and honestly just eyeballed it. I'm kind of surprised that it turned out so well in the end, which I know you probably don't want to hear from the person telling you how to make the costume, but yeah. After that, I cut out the pants, which was a colossal nightmare that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Seriously, I could not see a thing when I was cutting along these lines. I had to use my phone light constantly. Then I cut out the pieces for the top, and I was ready to sew everything together. Don't forget to add elastic to your pants and skirt. But before you sew your skirt together, you're going to want to finish the belt pieces. If you have a serger, you can overlock the edges to keep everything clean, but that's totally optional. Oh, yeah, and don't forget to iron out all of your fabric before sewing it together or doing anything with it, but I guess that goes without saying. I took the belt pieces, some heat and bond tape, and extra wide bias tape and sandwiched the edges of the pieces, sans the top, between the heat and bond and the bias tape to give the skirt the colored edges. You can sew it if you want, but I personally found this to look cleaner, and since this has to take like zero strain, I saw no harm in it. Swirly accents at the edge of Katara's skirt, I found some cricket faux leather at Michael's and got my sister to cut up the shapes, which cost me a grand total of 1 Domino's pizza. After applying the leather accents, I sewed everything together and was ready to move on to the wig. I got my wig from Charisma Wigs on Amazon, which, if you want lace front and quality and you're on a budget, Charisma's the way to go. I'm not gonna lie, this wig was an absolute beast to figure out. Let's start with the bun. I sectioned off a part in the front on either side, and hairsprayed and alligator clips are your best friend here. I basically just clipped the hair where I wanted it, and set it in place before the spray dried. Once that was done, I took the remaining hair in the back and made my bun by pulling the hair through halfway, wrapping the leftover hair around the bun, and securing it with a bobby pin. Kind of like Rey's hairstyle from Star Wars. Does that make sense? Now let's move on to the ponytail bun thingies. This was a lot easier. I basically just took some Kanekalon, made Rey buns at the ends, and then pinned it to the bottom of the wig at the nape of the neck using the elastic that divides the bundle in half. Really nothing beyond that is needed. Oh yeah, shoes. I cut out 2 triangles in suede, then I cut some strips of gold vinyl, pressed them onto the edges, and then, with the new triangles, I glued them onto some flip-flops from Amazon. Super simple. Really don't need anything beyond that. Right, for the choker, you're basically going to want to measure a triangle the length of your choker dowel, but add enough length for you to be able to tie it in the back and keep it secure. Once you do that, you can finish the edges however you like, but I chose to use fray check to keep it from looking too bulky, which ended up turning my sitting room into a gas chamber, and since I was watching a fellow YouTuber roast Onision's terrible lighting, which, if you're at all familiar with Onision, is like the least terrible thing he's done, but I digress. In any event, it was not pleasant, so I would advise is to open up a window. After fray checking the edges, I added E6000 to the slit of the dowel and used my clippers to gently push the top of the edge of the choker inside. Once that was done, I added 3 jewels and then everything was complete. For makeup, I decided to keep it natural looking since I can't imagine Katara wearing a whole lot, if any at all, since she is 14. I kept it to the basics: primer, foundation, contour, setting powder, and flesh-colored tones. If you want an in-depth tutorial, just look up natural looks on YouTube. I'm sure you'll find something that suits your needs. Once I was satisfied with my makeup, which I guess I could have worn more of in hindsight, I decided to put on my costume. And that's it. I have to say I'm pretty satisfied with how this costume turned out. Now that Avatar is on Netflix, I'm curious to know what your favorite characters are. Why don't you leave your answers in the comments below? That's all for now, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. 15, and so I'll read